Hey, it's Don McLaughlin from Falcon Discovery here at Legal Tech 2014 in New York. I'm happy to have with me Dean Gonsowski from Recomind. Dean, great to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Nice to be here.
So tell me what your current role is at Recomind and what your day-to-day focus is.
So I'm the VP of Business Development at Recomind. I run a team of SMEs that focus on e-discovery. We also work on sort of the partnership side, focusing on information governance as well, on kind of that area, that new sort of go-to-market strategy there, and then we also do some customer engagement stuff with some of our more strategic customers.
Terrific. Okay, great. A broad spectrum,
yeah.
Which is perfectly suited for you, given your tenure of experience in this industry, and looking back, the retrospective on 2013. What trends do you feel like solidified, or one trend that you feel like really solidified in 2013 above all else?
I'm going to dodge the question a little bit in that interesting for me, last year when we spoke, I talked a lot about information governance, and I think information governance has a good trajectory and is continuing to gain speed organizationally. We hear more and more folks who are interested in it, are interested in conquering dark data, are interested in remediating their information, are worried about PII, et cetera. Interestingly, though, as I focus more on information governance, I kind of took my eye off e-discovery, and I thought, all right, we got a lot of people who are looking at e-discovery, and with predictive coding, it's naturally going to just keep getting the trajectory that it so richly deserves.
Yep.
I've been surprised that when I talk to practitioners, I don't think we've crossed the chasm with predictive coding. I still am very surprised to hear a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt around the use of predictive coding. And you get folks, I was just in a session just a few minutes ago where they were talking about, well, we're only going to use it here when the document size is so big, or we're only going to use it here if the other side will agree to it, and we don't want to get in a big fight about protocols. We only want to, one guy actually said you should only use it in certain jurisdictions where the bench is well versed in predictive coding. And I think one of the things I'm going to focus on this year, and I know Recomind is as well, is we need to get predictive coding across the chasm. And I know you guys have been early adopters for a lot of different technology, but I still surprised that when you ask people percentages of all the cases that are used with predictive coding, a lot of people will tell you 1, 2, 3% that utilize predictive coding. And so I think we need to bring predictive coding to the masses. And that's one of the things that we're going to focus on is we need to sort of take this sort of predictive coding is only for the big, hairy cases and say, no, let's understand why we use predictive coding, why we use machine learning, whether it's prioritization, whether it's sort of ranking of documents, whether it's to find case insights, whether it's, all this sort of different permutations. I think we need to get that dialogue out there better and get people to be less afraid of predictive coding.
And what do you think that fear stems from? Is it a lack of understanding? Is it economics in terms of the reduction in the billable hour? What's your sense?
I think there's a lot of different factors. One, I think I'll blame the vendors, and I've been part of this in terms of the confusion. I think people have talked generically about predictive coding as it's one thing versus a wide variety of different use cases and permutations and approaches, right? So you have people who will say, well, you can only do predictive coding in this fashion. And I think that has been the bench has picked up on that as well. So you don't have people who are really speaking about predictive coding, I think, in a more enlightened fashion. And I think conferences like this are a good example of, we talk a lot about it, but are we really moving predictive coding and machine learning forward in the practice? And so I think there's a lot of things to blame in terms of the people who should be leading. In terms of, people are still concerned about defensibility and transparency. And they feel like, well, if I've got a predictive coding protocol, that's a whole nother thing for us to fight about. Well, are you fighting about a protocol for keyword search? Well, why have we somehow made predictive coding, which is obviously a better technology and a better way to do e-discovery, why have we sort of burdened it with a lot of sort of complications? So I'm going to, for this year, the team at Recomind, we're really going to focus on making this simpler for people to understand. And there's a great quote by Richard Branson. He said, any fool can make something complicated, right? It's how do we take something that is inherently complicated, like machine learning, and its application in e-discovery, how do we make that simpler, right? So you don't think about something like Netflix and has Netflix know what the next sort of TV show you should watch. But for some reason we get wrapped around the axle with statistics and confidence intervals and F measures and all the things behind predictive coding, which are important. But the reality is, as an attorney, you just want to find the relevant documents faster, cheaper, easier, more accurately, etc. And the technology can do that, but somehow I think we've lost our way a little bit.
Well, it's perfectly suited, you'd think, for lawyers that are really chartered with making the complex simple.
Right.
And it may be that the positive experiences with predictive coding will outweigh that uncertainty and fear.
I would hope so, but I still hear people say, well, we used it on this one case and it worked great. And then the question is, well, are you going to use it in the next case? Well, we're not sure. It depends on the size. And I just heard someone talk about, okay, it's got to be under 100,000 documents and it's got to be this and it's got to be that. And so you get this sort of like, look, if the technology works, let's figure out how to use it in every case. And you may not use it the same way in every case. You may just say, look, all we want to use it in this case is for some quality control and some sampling, or some prioritization, or some use cases that no one's going to have any issue with. So let's figure out how to leverage the technology, the toolkit that we have as best as possible.
Well, it's interesting because our corporate clients increasingly want to use it across the board,
right,
in some form or fashion,
right,
because of the advantages that they've seen with the technology, on top of which corporate clients can license a tool like Recomind, right, and therefore it's in the toolkit ready to go.
It should be, in my mind, and it's probably going to sound strange coming from a vendor, but it should be agnostic, right? Your corporate client should basically say, look, this is a better way, and depending on the matter and the firm and who's using it, let's deploy that technology. It just needs to be much more pervasive, and we need to get out of the sort of, well, this vendor kind of does it this way, and we're afraid, and they charge more, and there's all these sort of like, there's all these obstacles to utilizing predictive coding, and I'm surprised that we haven't made more progress, and I'm concerned that we get to legal tech next year and we're talking again. The question will be, did we make progress in this area? And I'm confident we're going to make progress on things like, information governance and some other areas that are out there, and more, transparency and proportionality. It just still feels like this sort of machine learning aspect is, we need to get broader, more mainstream adoption and take away the obstacles.
Well, it may be what a GC that I met with yesterday in Denver said to me, which is, really the lawyers out there practicing at firms representing clients really won't change until the client demands it.
Yeah, I think that's key. I mean, you'd like to think forward-thinking counsel would, get out of the sort of dark ages and bring this technology to their clients, because it makes for better discovery. It's not just faster discovery, cheaper discovery, it's better discovery. But I think you're right. You need sort of this yin and yang between the counsel sort of getting it and also the corporate client saying, look, guys, this is, you need to explain to me why we're not going to use this, right? It shouldn't be this, let's find the right case and have the perfect storm for predictive coding. It's, let's leverage the technology. It's out there. And we're talking about, terabytes and terabytes and tens of millions of documents in almost every case now. There's no reason not to leverage all the tools that are out there.
Well, it's interesting because for us with the corporate clients, they one or two positive experiences and massive cost reduction on an order of tenfold. All of a sudden, they get to the point where it is the default in the initial conversation with outside counsel.
Yeah. And I think you're right. The question is how do we accelerate that so that you don't have to sort of see it firsthand on the one perfect storm case and then get converted. How do we get people to sort of join forces and just make this happen?
That's right. And one case in particular that comes to mind in the last 6 months is a case that arguably too small for predictive coding.
Right.
But in the end, the savings of $400,000 or $500,000, that's real.
Right. And I would argue, when is savings or efficiency, whether it's time or cost or money, whatever it is, when are those not important, right? Even if it saves you a week and 100 hours of somebody's time, and you get to the facts quicker, or whatever element that's a benefit that's good for you, when is that not useful? And so I think that's one of the things that just to me seems like we've mystified predictive coding, and I'd really like to see sort of us open the kimono and get behind how the different tools work. Let's talk much more candidly about machine learning and get out of this sort of, it's tar here, car there, and predictive coding, and we've obfuscated this process a lot.
What do you think, looking ahead to 2014? There's been obviously now nearly 10 years of focus on e-discovery. Do you see both from the past year and the year ahead, corporations still struggle with?
I think proportionality is obviously still an issue, and how do we sort of understand the case and make arguments about what's proportional and what's right-sizing this. I think that's one of the issues what we'll continue to wrestle with. I almost feel like maybe a bigger one though is we need to kind of change the way we think about discovery and the sort of the three buckets, the responsive, non-responsive, privileged, sort of that kind of approach, which is fundamentally that gets us to what our burden is. The reality, and we've talked about this before, is as a litigator you need to understand your case, and it seems like people still, no one denies that, but it feels like we're still in this 20-year-old sort of mechanism where we're going through and responding to discovery, and it's this sort of, even if the technology's gotten better,
very mechanically.
Right, it's still mechanically like, okay, we're going faster on the treadmill, but we need to basically get to the point is like, how do we understand the case and work backwards from the 5 documents that we need at trial, and basically say, look, let's get insights into the matter, and you can do that in parallel with your burden for e-discovery, but it feels like that piece kind of gets lost sometimes in terms of let's slog through e-discovery and forget about the facts and the analytics and the value that we can derive from the case.
And in the year ahead, what do you see Recommind bringing to the market and pushing forward? You mentioned predictive coding. That's obviously going to be a focus. Others?
We've got our big launch. Accelerate 5 is just launching at the show here. Actually launched on Monday. Our big plan for Accelerate 5 is, for a long time we talked about enterprise grade, which is always meant powerful, and we were kind of this sort of F1 race car of performance, and we realized people didn't want to take the F1 to the grocery store. It was viewed as overkill for that kind of thing. So what we're doing is we've completely rebuilt Accelerate from the ground up and made it consumer grade, which is you realize, wait, those analytics, they're powerful, they're great, but if people can't use them and aren't comfortable with them, they don't use them. So how do we sort of take that high performance engine and skin it in a way that has hundreds of advancements, but basically makes it simpler? So it's back to that Branson quote, right? It's how do you take what's fundamentally complex technology and make it easy to use? So that's for us the big key, is simplifying now the use of predictive coding, expanding it, and then taking away any sort of pricing differentiation. Basically saying, look, we want people to use predictive coding for every matter and use it for the masses. And anything we've done historically that hasn't helped that, we're trying to push out of the way.
Interesting. So both demystifying, but also at the same time making it much more practical and approachable.
Exactly. There's no reason we think of for people not to have the predictive coding tool set available in every case. And if we put a burden in the way, and if we had in the past, we're stopping that. So that's for us a big challenge and a big opportunity here in 2014.
That's terrific. Well, best of luck with that, and really appreciate it, Dean.
Okay, thanks, Don.
Thank you.